Hiya, can you hear me?
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world. Coming to you all the way from Ireland, it's Sandie Byrne.
Hey, guys, and welcome to Tipperary for another hour. And thanks for joining in. So I'm live here on Podbean. Hi, everybody. I can see people coming in. And I'm also simultaneously live on TikTok. And somebody's asking me, do I like One Direction? I'm not a particular fan. I'd probably sing along if they were on the radio. But no, I'm not a particular fan. I'm not a particular fan of actually many bands. Particularly, I like music. I like songs. If I was to choose a band, it would probably be the Lumineers. I've seen them in concert a few times, and they're amazing. Anyway, we're talking ship, and I've kind of been struggling trying to think of things that would interest people for me to talk about on the podcast because I know everything. Am I trans? I kind of know, well, I don't know everything to do with mediumship, but I know a lot about mediumship because I do it every day. I work it every day. Okay. So, I'd really love if people gave some input as to what they'd like to hear on the podcast as well. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is tonight I want to talk a little bit about maybe why what spirit go through when they cross over, why I like to give them at least 3 months before we I wouldn't say bother them for a reading, but before we try and connect with them, I suppose is the best way to put it. So I'm sure that a lot, people generally join in the program because they've lost somebody. Okay. And, it's quite natural, especially, in the early days, maybe after a loss that you think, oh, I'll go to a medium or whatever. And I have an unwritten rule, if you like, and it's the first thing that I'd ask people is your loved one passed more than 3 months? Okay. And people ask a lot, why do you ask that? There's a lot of variables when you're coming for a mediumship reading. Okay. And one of them is how somebody died. Okay. Because it really can affect how and when they come through to you afterwards. Okay. So, for example, it takes a lot of energy, first of all, I suppose, for a spirit to come through. It doesn't matter how they're coming through, if it's clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyant, or whatever. It doesn't matter how they're coming through. It just, each way takes a lot of energy. And, I know I refer to it a lot, but I'm sure a lot of you have already seen the movie Ghost. It's an old one, but it's still a good one, with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. Okay. So, in that movie it shows him in the underground, in, I don't know what city it is in New York, but he's on the underground. He meets another spirit of somebody who's passed, and they're helping him, to manipulate stuff, how to kick a Coke can in this particular example. And it's about learning how to focus his energy. It's about building up the energy and directing it. So this is something that every spirit has to learn when they cross over. Okay, how am I going to connect with how am I going to connect with people? How am I going to give them signs? How can I make a robin fly to this place? How can I knock the picture over? These are all kinds of signs that we're looking for around the house. We're looking for signs like feathers. We're looking sometimes for money. Okay, we look for lots of different stuff, and it does take a lot of energy. So this is one thing we have to allow the spirit to build up after their passing. They have to build up their energy. So if you think about how your loved one passed, okay, and I know it's really difficult to think about how somebody passed, but I mean, really, there's two ways we can go. We can have illness and we die, or we can die suddenly. Okay, really, everything falls into one of two categories. Okay, so if you take someone who has been ill, okay, it doesn't matter what age they are, we can all be ill, we can all have illness somehow. We grow weaker, we're fighting illness, we still get ever weaker, and eventually our body gives up on us and we cross over. Okay? So in an instance like that, people when they cross over to the spirit world, they're already devoid of energy. Okay, because they've used all of their energy fighting illness when they were here on the earth plane. Okay, so they would um they would take longer to build that energy up. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you, maybe not everybody, but I'm sure a lot of you will have seen somebody that you love getting ill, fighting illness, and being completely exhausted before they actually let go. Okay, and I know that's kind of um hard to talk about, okay, but that's the way it happens. And we sit by their bedside and we read newspapers to them, or we read books to them, we tell them what's going on in the world, even when they can't respond to us. And then, they get so weak that eventually they cross over. Unfortunately, they cross over. So they arrive in the spirit world completely exhausted. They've used every ounce of their energy fighting this illness on the earth plane. So I don't care who you are, okay? Every medium is still scared when it comes to that moment, because it's a huge change, okay? So they need time when they cross over to build that energy back up. And it takes time. So I say allow at least 3 months. And the reason I do is because, yes, I've had connection with people, my own loved ones, in the early days after they've passed. But I have one particular relative who didn't come through. He came through in the first week after he passed. And then we didn't hear another dicky bird from him for, nearly 8 years. So, everybody's different and people need to come to terms with what's happened to them. So then you look at somebody who has passed. Maybe there's been a tragic accident. Maybe they have a sudden stroke, a bleed on the brain, whatever it might be. Okay. And they seem to be perfectly healthy 1 minute and then they've crossed over the next. Someone like that is probably more likely to come through in the early days because they didn't use their energy fighting illness in life. Okay. So they had all their energy when they crossed over. So they don't need as much time to build up energy as somebody who was ill in this life. Okay, so in the early days, you're more likely to get signs from someone who crossed over quite suddenly. The other thing we have to think about is the change. Okay, and grief after death. Okay, grief is a huge thing. Okay, we all suffer from it, and we have to accept that our loved ones aren't coming back. Okay, and we've lost just one person. We've lost that person. But what about them? Okay, we rarely think about their grief. Okay, my video in my bio isn't working. Oh, there isn't a video in my TikTok bio, Tamara. Sorry, somebody's asking the difference between a psychic and a medium. Okay, I'll explain that very quickly. The video's on my website. So the difference is this, in a short sentence: the difference between a psychic and a medium. A psychic is someone who reads the energy of the living, and a medium is someone who reads the energy of the dead. Okay, so a psychic would read you, what's going on in life, what's coming up in the future, and then the medium just talks to dead people, if you can say just talks to dead people. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's the difference. So I'm a psychic medium, so I do both kinds of readings, but when you're looking for a reading, you should always check that the person who can the Linktree one. Oh, is that not working? Okay, Tamara, thank you. I didn't realize that. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'll have a look straight after the podcast. Okay, so that's the difference between a psychic and a medium. So the other thing that I was saying was grief. Okay, and we always think about our grief here on the earth plane. Okay, which is fair enough. But we rarely think about the grief of the person who's passed, and they have to grieve too, because we've lost just them and they've lost us, but they've also lost their other family members, their friends, their neighbors, their community, maybe their co-workers. They've lost everything. They've also lost, the life that they were living, the life they thought that they were going to have. They've lost their future, they've lost all their belongings, they've lost absolutely everything. So we also have to give them time to grieve for what they've lost. And, they also have to come to an acceptance that they're not coming back. Okay, that this is it. And, I like to give them time for that as well. Okay. So this is kind of where my thinking is with giving them time. And I say at least 3 months, but, you could wait 6 months, you could wait 6 years, you might never go for a reading. I just say at least 3 months, just to give spirit time to settle in. Okay. And, when they cross over to the spirit world, we all hear on TV or magazines or programs, we all hear about this process that they have to go through where they look back on their life and they have to they have to look at everything that they've done wrong, what they could have done better, should have done better, all this kind of stuff. Yes, that has to happen, and it will happen to us all. So we will meet with our spirit guides when we cross over. Some people call it the hall of welcome, or there's lots of different names people give to it. I don't necessarily call it anything in particular. um m- my understanding from connecting with spirit is this: you're met by your own loved ones when you cross over. Okay. Someone will come to bring you across. So your mom, your dad, your husband, wife, whatever it might be, son, daughter, if you've lost them first. So someone will come and meet you and bring you across. Okay. And then you will be greeted by the extended family, everybody else that you know. And you'll have a little bit of time to get to know them, but you will also have some time to come back. And the amount of spirit that come through and talk about the different things at their funeral, the music that was played, the people that attended, the people that didn't attend, so they talk about a lot of detail about the funeral. So they do come back and attend their funeral. They do come back to say their goodbyes. But then after this initial period, they have to sit down with their spirit guides and they do have to go through, what they did in life. As I say, what they could have done better, what they should have done better, what they absolutely did that was horrific. People like Ted Bundy, I'm sure, spent a lot of time sitting down with his spirit guides when he crossed over to the spirit world, and has to go through all of that. Okay. So they'll do that, but yes, and somebody's asking here on TikTok, do spirits have a different timeline to us? They do. Time doesn't mean that much to them, but it does pass very, very quickly in the spirit world. So, as a rule of thumb, a month in earth time is like a day in spirit time. Okay. So, for every 1 month your loved one has passed, for them it's like a day. So, for every 12 months they've passed, it's only like 12 days. So by the time we're having our month's mind memorial, for them, they're only gone just 1 day. Okay. So this is really important to give them this time. And I say 3 months, which to them is like 3 days. So you're just giving them 3 days to settle down in the spirit world, to meet everybody that they need to meet, to go through everything they need to go through with their spirit guides, and to find some acceptance for what they've been through. Okay. And, I hate to talk about it, but I think a lot of people in this day and age know somebody who's been affected by suicide. Okay. I worked with younger people. I worked in a university for 13 years. So I know, you don't work with younger people for that amount of time and not experience suicide. So I think there's an awful lot of people who would have come into contact in some way, shape, or form with a suicide in the community. Okay, so can you imagine someone who dies by suicide? When they cross over, their issue was with their emotional health. Okay, and they still have to deal with that because, you know we do have this idea that we're cured of absolutely everything when we cross to the spirit world. Now, that's not necessarily the case, because when it's emotional, you still take your emotional self with you. So if you've been struggling emotionally, this isn't something that disappears by leaving your physical body, and this is something that still has to be dealt with when you reach the spirit world. And it's obviously not talked about a lot, and I think it should be talked about more, because it might take away some of those spur of the moment losses that we suffer as communities and families, that they would still have to deal with these issues when they arrive in the spirit world. Okay, now the one thing I would say is you probably do get a lot more support in the spirit world than you do on the earth plane, especially for those of us who are here in Ireland, because the mental health facilities here are not fantastic at all. And when you cross over to the spirit world, you have your spirit guide there to help you, but you would also get help from somebody who's been through something similar to you. Okay. So, for example, somebody who dies by suicide will be buddied up, if that's the term you want to use, or partnered with another person who has died by suicide in the past, and they've come to terms with it, so they will help you come to terms with it. Maybe somebody who's died of a cancer, or somebody who's died very suddenly, maybe of a heart attack or a brain bleed or something, that they will also be teamed up with somebody who's been through a similar experience, just so that they can help them with the whole process. Okay, so there is an awful lot of support in the spirit world, but nonetheless, this time of adjustment is very much required. Okay, so that's why I ask people, give them time after they cross. Now, there's no hard and fast rules, and I say this every week. There's no hard and fast rules with mediumship, because for everything you say, you're going to have somebody say, "Oh, well, I got a reading and this and that and the other," and absolutely, it can happen. And I'm going to give you an example. So a few years ago, I had a girl booked in, and there's different times when it's busier for readings. Okay, and at this point, I think I was booked up like 3 or 4 months in advance, because I remember this girl, she'd waited patiently for 3 months before she could get an appointment for a reading. And I try not to have anybody waiting that long, because I think if people want to come to talk to spirit, they want to come sooner rather than later. But anyway, she did. She waited very patiently for her 3 months, and she came for her reading. Now, as it happened, she came in, and immediately I was aware of a gentleman with her as she walked into the room, and I was talking away to this gentleman and telling her all about all the details about him, how he died, all the rest of it. And to cut a long story short, this gentleman had died by suicide. Okay. And he had died by suicide, but he'd only died 19 hours before she came for her reading. Okay. So when she booked to come for a reading, she had somebody else. Am I reading that from my screen? No, I'm just sorry. Somebody's asking me on TikTok, am I reading from my screen? I'm just looking at my screen because I'm live on my podcast at the moment, and my podcast, I don't know what you call it, your podcast software, your app is on my computer screen. So I'm just looking at the comments and questions there too. So what was I saying? I've completely lost my train of thought now. I shouldn't be reading the comments, because it really does make me lose my train of thought. Because once I start laughing, I do lose my train of thought. Oh yes, this young lady that came to me. So as it happens that when she had booked the appointment initially, she had obviously somebody else in mind that she wanted to connect with. But just the day before she came for her appointment, she lost another close family member to suicide. Okay. Now, I said to her, that she could have cancelled, could have postponed, whatever. But she said that she'd wanted to come because obviously she'd waited so long, and she had secretly hoped that he would come through, just because he'd passed away the day before. And, he came through so clearly and gave so much detail. It gave her such great closure. And his funeral hadn't even taken place at this point. So he was aware, obviously, he was a close family member. He was aware that she was coming to me for a reading the following day. And this was part of his reasoning, of his timing for leaving, that he figured that, if he left that day, that he could still connect with her the following day and explain. And that's exactly what he did. And he came through very, very strongly, very, very clearly, but as I said, he was a very young and able bodied man that left. He wasn't ill. So he didn't use his energy before he left the earth plane. So he had some energy to give, but they will always, always, always be supported by somebody in the spirit world. Okay. So he was getting help of other family members because it still was very, very early. It was only 19 hours after his passing. Okay. And I could talk all day about suicide. Is there anybody on that has been bereaved by suicide? I do after the podcast, Sal Nurse. Yeah. So I just answered a question there on the TikTok. Is there anybody on who has been bereaved through suicide? Because yes, me. Okay. Um, because it really is a very difficult thing, and I don't know where you're joining from. I'm in Tipperary in Ireland, and the suicide rate here has been really ridiculous. And not even just, yes, it's been ridiculous through the pandemic, but in Tipperary where I live, um, it's really been high for the last number of years. You're in Tipperary as well. Yeah, Belfire. We have a huge rate of suicide here. And they don't seem to be doing anything about it. And in our community, there was a 15-year-old boy who passed away last year. And, part of his legacy was, and he'd written it down before he left, that he wanted, his memory and his story used to help other young boys or men going through the same thing that he went through when he was here with his struggles with mental health. Okay. Sky High also in Scotland, I'm being told here, not talked about. Exactly. Mental health in Ireland isn't helped enough, unfortunately. It's so not. Okay. And Jennifer is saying that, Janet lost her sister 6 months ago. I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, it really is a scourge. And I've often thought, should I, will you ask me that in a minute, Michaela, again? I've often thought, should I, go and talk maybe in places like Pieta House and tell them about some of the experiences of people that I've had, coming back to me. Now, I won't lie to you. I've connected with people who've died by suicide, and, they've come back and said they wouldn't change a thing, that they wanted to go. And if they had the choice again, they'd still, make the same decision. But equally, I've had other people come back and say that they didn't realize what they were doing. It was spur of the moment. They'd had too much to drink. They just felt stuck in a moment, like the song. So, there's really differing sides to it. But I think that if a lot of people, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I often feel that if a lot of people knew that the one thing that's common across all the readings that I've done is that they still have to deal with the emotional issues, even though they've gone. You know, do you think so, Janet? Because, I never feel it's my place to offer myself. Um, but I don't know how else to reach out to people who feel like this. It can't do any harm. That's it's very, very true. And over the years, I've met a lot of people who felt that way. So is there a healing period over there? Yeah, we were just talking about that, Gabby Chick, about the time they take. Well, I suppose to be fair to you, we were talking about the time that they take to build up the energy. But yes, it's the same for injuries when people cross over. So sometimes, I'm not saying they're sick or anything, but whatever injuries that they would have had or whatever illness took them, they might oh, you tried twice, thank God you're still here. Okay, so yes, some people can take some time to heal from the injuries, not necessarily the physical, but the emotional. And even if someone's passed very suddenly, think of the emotional scars that leaves. you know so you have to be realistic about it and give them the time to do that. you know So somebody here, and very brave to talk about it, saying that they tried to end their own life twice, but um, they're so delighted to still be here and to still reach out and help other people. Okay. So I see lots of questions coming in. I'm going to try and answer all of them. But on the subject of, I don't want to just, hog it by me talking. And we do go across to suicide, and maybe it's something that we can talk about in depth another time. But do you have any questions with regards to people who have crossed over? Okay, what they go through, who they meet, what it's like over there. Matty lady, yes, seriously. Okay. Um, so I just want to wait a minute and see, does anybody have now? We never expected him to go. I know. Um, there is a good book for anybody who reads, okay, and I recommend it all the time, and it's called Seven Steps to Eternity by a guy called Stephen Turoff is his name. Stephen with a PH and then Turoff. It's called Seven Steps to Eternity. Now, for any of you who studied English, it's not the best written book that you'll ever read. Spellings and grammar isn't fantastic. It was just written by a medium. It's the story of a young man who passed in the Battle of the Somme, and he tells the story of what he went through in those early days after he lost his life, okay, and about how he came back to visit his parents, and about exactly what he saw when he crossed over, the way he envisaged the afterlife to be, and all the rest of it. Okay, so it is a really interesting book, and not a very long book. It's about 180, 190 pages, so it won't take you forever to read it, but it really is really, really interesting. Okay, so here we go. Where did I see that? Can they choose not to come back to speak to somebody? Absolutely, Tamara. Some people choose never to come through. My grandmother died when I was only very young. She died in 1982. And I've only had contact with her once. And the reason she came through that once was because um, I was to go to a medium show with my mum here in Ireland. There was a medium over visiting from the UK, and we got tickets, thought we'd have a nice night out. But as it happened, my aunt over in the UK took ill, so my mum went to be with her. So I went with somebody else, and that night the medium came straight onto stage, and walked straight over to where I was sitting in the audience and pointed to me. And she said, somebody here, she said, has an anniversary today. As it happened, it was my grandmother's anniversary. And that's why I bought the tickets, because I thought, well, it's her anniversary. Maybe she'll come through, because she had never been through in all the years. And she said, somebody here has an anniversary today. So I said, yeah, that's me. And she said, your grandmother Mary is here, spot on. And she said, and she says that she's waiting for Mary. And my aunt that was ill in the UK, her name was Mary. We called her Mary Lou. And she said she's here because she wants you to know that she's waiting for Mary. And my aunt was only 61, and she passed 6 days later. And that's the only time since 1982 that my grandmother has come forward to say something. Never. Other than that, she's never. And she was a medium. She was a medium and a psychic, and she still never came through. And her mother was a medium and a psychic, and her grandmother was a medium and a psychic, and she still doesn't come through. So it just depends. I think when she left, she was only 56 when she died herself. And I think when she left, she just left this world. She just decided to leave everybody in peace, I don't know why, but if she's okay, then I'm okay. Um, let's see. Do I ever get the urge to pass on a message from spirit to a stranger out in public? Yes, Ross, I do. And it's not always welcome. And yes, I watch, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of a lady called Theresa Caputo, and she's a medium. She calls herself the Long Island Medium, and she's a program on television. And she would go around, and maybe she's like in a baker shop or in a supermarket or something, and she would read for somebody, that she meets someone that's serving her or whatever. And yes, I've done that a couple of times, but Ireland is a very different kettle of fish. Not everybody would be as open to it, okay? Even in my old job, back in the day, I had a cup of coffee thrown at me, because I mentioned to a woman that there was somebody there with her, and that it was the birthday, and she wasn't open to hearing it. Now, it was explained to me by somebody else afterwards that this person was actually a stillborn child, that she'd lost many years before. But yeah, so things like that would put me off doing it in the future, because yeah, people just aren't as open to it here just yet. But would love to be able to do that. Now, I have to say, once there was a lady, I actually was buying granite for my fireplace, and I was in the shop choosing the granite. And I just turned to the lady and said, "Is that your husband standing beside you?" I said, "Hey, this guy had a cancer," and I told her where he had the cancer and everything. And I said, "He's only, like, 42 years old." And she looked at me and she goes, "Yeah." So, like, she was open to it, and she said that she'd been waiting for a sign from him for a long time. But, like, for every one that I'll get that will be open to it, you'll have like 20 that would tell you to F off as quick as you'd look at them. Okay. Hey, Karen. Karen's on Podbean. I have a reading booked with you, and I'm so hoping to be able to connect with my soulmate. Karen, I hope that I don't let you down. Okay. Um, I don't really have many experiences where people have been let down, thank God, with the medium readings. So we do always seem to find the person. So I just say, and I always say this to people: if there's anything going on around you on the day, so you might wake up on the day that you've a reading booked, and you might get a phone call to say that somebody else close to you is in hospital, or there's something going on with one of your kids, or you just feel off. She says, "I've already connected with him." Okay, that's fair enough. But I do say to people, there's never a problem. I prefer if you give me a ring that morning and just let me know. There's never a problem to reschedule, because I always have people on the phone saying, "Can you fit me in today? Can you fit me in today?" So I would never say to somebody, "No, you can't change it. It's fine." I prefer that the energy would be right for a reading. And I've probably told this story before, but just as an example, I did have a woman with me a few years ago, and she came to my home for a reading. And I think it was a Tuesday night. I'll never forget it, because I'd never not been able to connect to somebody before. Now, I did connect for her. I connected to, I would easily say, 6 or 8 family members, but not the one she wanted. And and I must have been with her about 2 hours. Okay. And at the end, I said to her, "Look, I just can't connect. There's nobody else here. I've spoken to everybody." And she said, "I need to talk to my mom." And I said, "Well, I'm really sorry." And I said to her, "Look, if you're that upset, I won't charge you." I said, even though I had connected to lots of other family members. And she said to me, "Look," she said, "my sister is dying." Her sister, as it happened, was on life support machine in a hospital here in Ireland, and they were due to turn off the machine within 48 hours. And she needed to talk to her mother because she wanted to know that her mother was there waiting for her sister. And I said to her, I said, "Parent to parent," I said, "if your daughter was on life support machine in hospital, where would you be?" You'd be with her. Okay. So I said, "I've no doubt that your mother is with your sister at the moment." So I said, "Look, I won't charge you for your reading tonight." I said, "But you've got to promise me that you'll come back to me after the funeral when you're ready." And she did. She came back 10 days later, and we connected with both her mother and her sister. Okay. So my point being that if she thought about it before she came for her reading, she would have, and she wasn't thinking logically, because she was already grieving her sister, because her sister wasn't going to wake up and say goodbye. Okay. So she was grieving her sister. She wasn't thinking logically. But I said to her, "Look, I want you to connect with your mom as much as you want to connect with her." So I told her to come back to me, and she did, and we connected with both. And she went away, I wouldn't say happy, but maybe with a little bit of closure, or maybe a little bit more peace, than she had. So, it's something to bear in mind for, if you're going for a reading. It can take a while for the spirits, okay, to get settled. So, how do we know the spirits are happy? Well, I have to say to you, Jennifer, I've never once had a spirit tell me they're happy. Now, that does not mean that they're unhappy. Let me explain that. They would never, ever want us to think that they're happier where they are than they were when they were here with us. Okay? So if you, God forbid, if someday you lost a life partner or something, you were widowed, and you came to connect with your husband, and he says, "Great over here. I'm having so much peace. I don't want to go back." You'd feel very hard done by, wouldn't you? Okay. So they never say that. They always say, a good angel reader, you mean, where you based in. Okay, let's talk about the difference in the cards now in a second. So, they do come back and they tell us they're fine. They tell us that they're not ill anymore. They tell us that they've settled in. They tell us who they're with, who they've met. And then they talk about, things that they've seen since they crossed over. So the greatest evidence that I can give to somebody that life exists after death is by their loved ones telling us, "Hey, Angie," is it Angie on Podbean? Is their loved ones telling us things that are going on for them here on Earth. So I don't know if you saw a post. Those of you on TikTok anyway will have seen it. But people on Podbean, if you go to my TikTok, I put up a little post there a couple of days ago about a little conversation, a little snippet of a conversation that a lady who lost her husband had with him during a reading, and just the couple of little things that he said to her, about a scratch on the car. And, in that reading, he showed me her crying, standing beside her car. And he said, "Don't cry over a car. It's only a car." And she loves her car. It was her dream car. She'd finally got it. And she only got it a few weeks before he passed away. And she was getting out of the car coming home after being out somewhere, and she noticed a scratch on the car, okay, and she cried. And I don't really think it was to do with the car. I think it was like an accumulation of having lost him, and I think it was just, having to deal with this on her own maybe, whereas he'd always taken care of the car. Okay, so I think it was an accumulation of things, but the point of what he said was that he'd seen her crying over the car, okay? And that he always said, "It's just a car." Even when he was alive, he always said, "It's just a car, it's just a car." And for him to use that phrase, So the best evidence, I can't prove to anybody, I can't make anybody believe in life after death, but I can provide evidence. It's up to people to make their own minds up, okay? Hello, how am I today? I'm good, Ruby, thank you. How are you? Yeah, go to the link in my bio. I would love to know they are content. Yeah, exactly. And content is probably a better word, to be fair to you. Absolutely. Because they want us to know that they're okay, that they're over. For some reason, I'm getting all itchy. I don't suppose anybody lost anybody that had some kind of a skin disease or anything. I'm all of a sudden itchy, especially on my legs. I'm itching my knees here like mad. But yeah, so content is a really good word because they do find some level of contentment, some level of comfort, some level of peace, and some level of closure. Okay, so they're all the words that I would use, maybe except for happy. Okay, would spirit ever be disappointed in a person? No. Spirit would only be disappointed if you're disappointed. Okay, so I would never. How do you tap into your own psychic medium abilities? If I believe I have them. Okay, so if you don't believe, can you tell when I will conceive? Okay. Oh, Joy said her dad had something in the legs. He used to give out to him mad for scratching. All of a sudden, my legs have just got so scratchy. So Cheer Up Chili is asking if I do believe I have them. Okay, so if you don't believe, as I was just saying, I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. So I'll just come back to Dublin Bird's question first. Spirit only want us to be happy. And when they cross over to the spirit world, they see life from a different side, okay? So they're watching us to see, are we happy? Okay? Are we okay? Are we disappointed? Are we sad? Are we unsettled? And as long as we're happy, they're happy. Trust me, I've even, had people who really had horrific relationships with family members during life. And these family members have come back and they've talked to them and they've said sorry and they've apologized for all the hardship and all different things. And they've just come back and said, I just want you to be happy. And I didn't realize how unhappy you are. So disappointed, no, I've never ever met somebody or come across somebody who's had spirit come through to them and say they're disappointed. What they have had is spirit come through and say that they're disappointed to see how unhappy somebody is, if that makes sense. So it's not disappointment in somebody, it's their disappointment that they're not seeing happiness and contentedness and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So first of all, there's a lady here who's anxious for an answer about fertility. Okay, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nurse. Okay, so I can't advise you on fertility, but can I say to you, and I make no secret of the fact that I lost 6 babies. Okay, so I would say, and you know what? I can say to you, 9 babies I'm being credited with, but there's a crystal called ruby Zozite, and I don't think I have any left because anytime I get any in, they're gone like that. I, as I say, lost 6 babies, and I got myself some ruby Zozite, and I was pregnant within weeks, and I kept that baby. Now I did stay in bed, I did rest up as much as I could, but I carried that pregnancy with no problems at all. So what happened then afterwards, I had a lady who came to me and she had been trying for 7 years to have a child and was having no success. And she came to me for a reading for that purpose. So when that came up in the cards, I actually had the stone because I brought it down to show to somebody. And I had like a big sphere of it that I'd imported from Spain. But you can get just a little tumble stone, it works just as well. And I gave this to her and I said, take it. I said, and I hope it brings you joy. And I met her in town about, I'd say it was 3 or 4 months later. It wasn't that long afterwards. And when she saw me, she ran, and I thought, oh, this one doesn't want to see me. Something must have gone wrong. And next thing, she came running after me with a bunch of flowers. She was already expecting, and she was past the 6 week mark, so it didn't take long to work. So the only advice that I can give you, because I'm not a medical person, this is not medical advice, this is experience. Ruby Zozite is the name of the crystal. Okay, and definitely get yourself some, because I did get a bag of it in. It can be quite difficult to get, so if you're having trouble getting it, come back to me, because I actually imported a bag of it from Spain, and like that, it literally was just gone. I think I only had like 10 pieces, and 9 of those women have babies now. Okay, so I would definitely, it's a powerful stone, and if you want a baby, that's what you need. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit. Finally got you on this. Hey, Breed. Oh, thank you, Angie. But I mention it because I want people to know that they're not alone, that other women do suffer issues having babies as well, whether it's getting pregnant or whether it's carrying a baby to term. There's lots of people that suffer these things. But I found a way around it. I have 2 healthy children, I'm delighted to say. So I never consider myself badly off, because I've been in the unit in the hospital with other would-be mothers, if you like, or people trying to expand their families, and some of them didn't have success afterwards. I did, and I'm hugely thankful for that. And I tell my kids every day, I embarrass the life out of them. My grandmother, somebody talking about a grandmother, was so close. She died in 1993. I can never feel anything. Okay, where can I buy crystals? If there's loads of like holistic shops, angel shops, all that kind of stuff. Now, somebody asked me actually about angel reading. Okay, so I read angel cards, but I'm going to be very, 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 very honest with you. Okay, if you want to know what's coming up and you want the truth, go for a tarot reading. Okay, the angel cards are really, really nice. Okay, they are. Um, but they're about uplifting messages from your angels. You won't get truth from them necessarily in regards to what's coming up. So you will get uplifting messages. Okay, so for example, let me pull an angel card here. Not for anybody in particular, I just want to tell you the difference in what comes up in the cards. Okay, so I've just picked an angel card here. Okay, and what it's telling me is it's saying to somebody that it's time to let go of the upset that you've been carrying around with. You know, now is the time for you to move forward, that there's a huge window of opportunity coming up for you, but you need to let the healing happen first. Okay. So this is a lovely uplifting message because it's given somebody hope. It's saying to them that their time for being hurt, their time for feeling sorry for themselves is now over. There's a window of opportunity here to move forward and they're ready to make that move. So that's an uplifting message. There's nothing in the angel cards that's going to tell you your partner's having an affair. It's time to get out of that relationship quick. Okay. If you want that kind of information, that's the tarot you want to go for. Now, because I'm psychic, I have a tendency to read the angel cards maybe a little bit more psychically than they were ever designed to be written. Okay. And I will tell you, I'm actually in the process of designing my own deck of angel cards. So they won't be out for Christmas, unfortunately, but I am designing my own, which will have other little messages in there, which will be a little bit more than what a normal deck of angel cards would have. But they still won't be tarot cards. Okay. So the angel cards would be um they would be, I suppose, the nicer ones, the uplifting ones. So for anybody that's feeling emotionally low, you know, if you find you're suffering with anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff, I suppose the angel cards would be a better way to go because they do give you the hope. Because sometimes it's not appropriate for yeah, Angie's saying as hard as it would be, I think I'd like the truth. And I'd agree with you, Angie. I would be very much the same as that too. I want the truth. I want to know. If I'm going to go for a reading, I want to know the truth. Now, not everybody's ready to hear the truth. And if I can tell you a funny story, I read for a girl. I won't say where it was. It wasn't in Thurles. I was on the road at the time and I read for a girl in a hotel. And I said to her, your partner is cheating. And I told her she would be aware of it within the next 10 days and that she wasn't to make the move because at the time she was looking to make a move to be with him. And she said to me that if I was talking about any other man on the island, that she would believe me, but not her boyfriend. No, 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 no. And she shouted at me and she called me all kinds of names. Okay. And she refused to pay me. And I said to her, I said, that's fine. Okay. I said, but I said, you will find out this in the next 10 days. And I said, then you should pay me for my reading when you find out because karma can be a bitch. And that's not putting a curse on her. I shouldn't have said that word. I apologize. But anyway, karma can be very, very cruel. So I think this was like a Wednesday or a Thursday that I read for her. She rang me on the Monday and she had caught him with somebody else on the Sunday. Okay. And she paid me for my reading. Okay. So not everybody. The first question I ask before I look at the cards is how honest do you want me to be with what I see? And everybody says honest, totally honest. I want everything. But as it happens, sometimes they don't. Okay. They only want everything if it is what they want to hear. But if you tell me, and you know, when I started out, that's how I got a good reputation, I think, because I'm honest and I will tell you exactly what I see. Okay. And some people don't like that, and that's fair enough. You just came up with my FYP and it was a beautiful video of the message from husband to wife. I was just talking about that one, Jade. Thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, so I was just talking about that one a few minutes ago. And, you know, she was a lovely lady. Her husband left very suddenly. They'd retired early to spend time together and unfortunately didn't get to spend that time together. So it was really, really emotional. But it was just lovely. Is she recording a podcast? Yes, I am. Sorry. Honesty is the best policy, 100% for sure. Okay, do you feel connected with anyone now? Just out of curiosity. Hey Ross, so yeah, I will do some readings maybe. I just like to answer as many questions as I can while I'm on the podcast, and then I'll stay on a little bit afterwards. Okay, so while I have people on the podcast, the whole point of me starting the podcast, and I'm only on week 7 of it, okay, but just for information, the whole point of me starting the podcast was to answer as many questions. There's a lot of people that are confused about mediumship and the afterlife. There's a lot of people that wonder a lot about it. Okay, what does happen with this? How can I know this? How do I know if this is a sign? Okay, and I wanted to have somewhere where I could answer all of those questions. Hence the podcast. Okay, so even if you've listened to it live, I really would appreciate if you'd go in and just download it. To not You don't even have to listen to it again, just to get my download numbers up. That would be I'd really appreciate that. Okay, because it would just make me especially if you're listening on TikTok, obviously the people that are listening live on Podbean. But if you're listening on TikTok, I really would appreciate if you'd click into my website. If you go onto my website, sandiebyrne.com, and you can listen to the podcast live from there. But if you just click to listen, it just brings my listener numbers up. So it helps me. Yeah, I would love that. It is on Spotify, but somebody actually told me during the week that they're in the United States and they're not able to get it on Spotify. But it's available on Spotify here in Ireland. So I don't know if there's a geographical limitation with Spotify, but the easiest way to listen to my podcast, I put the widget on my website. So go into my website, choose podcast from the menu, and you can listen to any of the back episodes from there. Okay, and I try and explain one area of mediumship every single week, as I did tonight with what happens to them when they cross over. So there's 6 other episodes that are already up there with different themes for every week. So you will find a lot there. Now, somebody was asking about signs a few minutes ago. If ever you find that you've got some time, there's another page on my website, and it's entitled Live Webinars. Okay. And in there, you'll find a link. I did a webinar last week, so I don't have one scheduled at the moment, but you will find a link to listen to all the past webinars. And I have a couple of good ones in there about getting signs from the afterlife. I think one of them is called How Connecting with Spirit Can Enrich Our Lives and Eliminate Fears of Death. So if you watch that one, and then I can't remember what the other one is called, but it's something about how to receive signs or how to ask for accurate signs from the spirit world. Okay. So when you're looking for advice from the spirit world, how do you ask for a sign? So for example, one of the things that I talk about in there, okay, is like, I remember it because I love the song. Actually, Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 song. And so one of the examples I used was, if you were looking for a sign from a loved one with regards to which job you should take, okay? And if you had maybe an office job and you had maybe a job in construction and you were trying to make a decision between both, and you said, right, give me a sign within the next 48 hours. And then all of a sudden you heard Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, in your head, or, it was on the radio the minute you turned the radio on, or it came on randomly in an ice cream truck or something. Then okay, this is my sign. I'm to go for the office job. But on the other hand, if you heard the song YMCA, maybe, then and in their opinion, okay? So whenever you get a sign like that from spirit, it's always in their opinion. Remember, if your loved one was not a psychic when they were alive, they don't become psychic just because they've passed. When you connect with them, they can give you their opinion on what's going on and their opinion or their foresight into what might happen. But if they weren't psychic when they were alive, they haven't become psychic when they've passed. So just always remember, it's an opinion. That's what you go to your loved ones for. If you want to know what's coming up in the future and what's the best direction to take, that's a psychic reading. So that's the difference, if that makes sense. Okay. Do spirits move on? Somebody used to dream about my mum and granny a lot after they passed, but now nothing. Okay, so dreams is something that we talk about a lot. Okay, I used to do all these talks on Facebook Live, but I'm aware that not everybody's on Facebook. I'm currently on a 3-day ban for telling a friend of mine that I'd kick his ass. Okay, in a funny way, I said, I'll kick your ass, smiley face. And I got a 3-day ban for that. So I'm currently banned off Facebook. But dreams are the easiest way for spirit to connect with us, okay? And in those early days after somebody passes, it can be the quickest way for them to let you know that they're okay. Okay. The reason we get an awful lot of signs and connections through our dreams is this: spirit need room to come into your energy, they need space. So on a daily basis, okay, before my feet hit the ground, I have a million things going on in my head. Okay, did I take something out of the freezer for dinner last night? Have I something for lunch for my son going to school? Is his uniform ready for him to go to school? I better get out of bed and get into town before I miss the traffic. And like a million times, is there something to go into the dryer? Do I need to hang out washing? Did the cat get fed? Do I have to clean the litter tray? All of these things. From the minute you wake up in the morning, your mind is full of drivel that you need to do on a daily basis. Okay, so where's the time for spirit? Where is the room for them to come into your energy and give you signs? Okay, so the easiest way for them to do that is when you're in bed, because it's the only time of the day where you're lying down completely still, completely relaxed, and you're not thinking of a million things. Okay, however, there's two types of dreams. There's dreams where we dream about them and we remember them and honor them. And then there's dreams where they connect with us. So you have to be careful. So I have a rule of thumb to know the difference if you want me to share it with you. My rule of thumb is, the mornings you wake up and you feel like you've done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. Okay, I should say Conor McGregor, my countryman. But when you wake up and you feel that exhausted, that's generally when you've had a connection from spirit. Okay. The ones where you wake up and you feel oh, that was really nice. Ma'am came to me last night. It was lovely to see her face again. That was so nice. That's your memories. That's you thinking about her. Okay. So they're quite different. So spirit do use their energy. Like if you were to come to me or any medium for a reading, they're going to drain your energy and you're going to be twice as tired that night than you are any other night, because they've been drawing on your energy. And it's the same when your loved ones come through to you in a dream. So I hate to keep sending people to my website, but in the same place where you find the webinar repeats, I've also put up there copies of some. I did a series of interviews during the lockdown last year with some people. And one of the people that I had on was a guy called Paul Gill. And Paul Gill is the best dream interpreter on the island of Ireland. I can tell you that. And many people from around the world seek him out for his advice on what they're dreaming about. Okay. And he is amazing. He really is. I remember hearing him on the radio some years ago and just thinking, this man knows what he's talking about. Okay. He was interpreting a dream that a woman had that she'd written into the radio station about. And she had dreamt about her sister-in-law standing in an empty fireplace. And she said every single night her dream was the same. She dreamt about her sister-in-law standing in a fireplace. Okay, quite different. Dream interpretation is completely different from mediumship or psychic work. So, and he said to her, and I always remember this, her impression of her sister-in-law was that she had an empty heart. So, she was standing in the hearth of the fire, but the interpretation of the dream was that her sister-in-law had an empty heart. And I always remember that. And I just think I've heard him talk so many times. So I put the copy of the interview up there on my website. So please do feel free to watch it, because he's got great insight into what goes on in your mind when you're dreaming. And on that matter, just so you all know, I'm actually planning another series of Monday night talks. So I'll still do my podcast every Wednesday night, but I'm also going to have a series of Monday night talks during November. So I'm bringing on different people to speak, and I'm really excited about this one. One of the ladies that I have coming on to speak is she calls herself a master intuitive, but she actually communicates with angels. Okay, and she's Canadian and she's been working with angels for more than 40 years. So she's going to come on live and talk to us about that on Facebook. Now, you don't have to be a member of Facebook to join in, but I'm quite excited to have her come on. Okay. And I've got somebody else that I also have somebody that is a healer. I think she's in New Mexico in the United States. and she's an amazing lady. She used to read, and I kind of look at her now and I view her like one of these hippie kind of people. She actually used to read rune stones. She traveled around the United States in a camper van back in the 1970s, and she paid her way by doing readings for people all around the United States. And she read the rune stones, and she's very much into healing. And she's going to talk to us about her experiences and her healing energy. And I have a couple of other people that I haven't confirmed yet, but I will be putting up some details. So I will be putting up more details about that on my website and on my Facebook page and wherever I can to let you know. But that will be the Monday Night Talk show. I don't know what we're going to call it. I call them Monday Night Lives. Okay. So we will have them on live. So look, I've been on the podcast an hour, so I'm going to have to cut off Podbean or they're going to cut me off. So I want to say to all of you online, and thank you so much for joining, and Angie and Karen, you're the only names that I can read because there's other names here, but they're just jumble of letters. So it's okay that you don't have a profile, but just so you know, I do appreciate you all coming out and that you took whatever time to spend with me tonight. I'm going to stay on TikTok for a little while. So if you want to join me on there for another little while, do please come across. I will have this podcast up to listen back to, within the next hour or two. And I will be back on live at the same time next Wednesday. Okay. And as I say, if you have any aspect of mediumship that you always wondered about or want to find out more about, please let me know, and I'm quite happy to talk about it. Okay, so for tonight, good night, Podbean, and we'll see you next week.
Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world.
Don't have TikTok.
Coming to you all the way from Ireland, it's Sandie Byrne.
So Karen, I see that you don't have TikTok. Just go to my Facebook page. There's a link on there. I posted some pictures from Loftus House last weekend. It links you directly to my TikTok page. You don't have to be a TikTok member to go there. Okay. And I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.